had to happen, didn't it? Winter is closing in on us, and we need to get going on that cab. Last weekend, you might recall, I was up here with assistance from Peter Veer, who was helping me put that compass panel back on. It was the very last thing we did on Sunday, and I just could not get it to fit. In the test fits I'd done ages ago, it was actually a bit better, so I don't quite know what's happened now. And getting it to go back in its original place is proving quite difficult because I've replaced quite a bit of wood there. So that needs a little bit of adjustment today. I did manage to sneak up here midweek because it was playing on my mind, and I came up here one evening to have a look, and I made some adjustments to the side light piece, which was sticking out slightly. No, that's not helped either. So anyway, carrying on with the cab, it is getting there. I mean, but there's a lot of fiddly stuff now, so it's all the small bits and pieces. I've still got the regulator box to go back in, part of the floor, and the inner wing, and then obviously that compass panel. Once they're in, I could probably sizably say it's done. I'm then going to clamber in the cab with a brush, and I'm going to varnish all of the glossy stuff that's in there, which gives it a little bit more, the paintwork, a little bit more protection. So that's the plan of action. Let's see how much of this we manage to get done, shall we?
Right, first of all, a quick apology for how long it's taken me to get this one out. You may have noticed I didn't manage to put this one out last week because normally I get these out about midweek. Unfortunately, Movavi, my video editor, decided he didn't want to play ball, or maybe it was the computer, I don't know which. So I've been turning the thing on and off and fiddling around. This is about version 10, and I'm hoping to keep this quite short, so that it doesn't crash on me again. So if there's any wobbly bits in there, you know what's happened. Anyway, this particular weekend marks the autumn equinox, which is the length of the days and the nights are now equal, although it didn't feel like it because on the Saturday I got up there at 6 o'clock in the morning and it was dark, and I left with I think Peter Veer and a few others around 7 o'clock in the evening, and it was still slightly light. So I don't know how that one works out, but apparently that weekend was the equinox. Now it's starting to look like a bus again. I've got to the point now where I'm doing all of the little fiddly bits. Putting the compass panel back on, I think really sort of marks the completion of the big stuff, but it wasn't an easy fix. Right, so I had to kick off with trimming this woodwork back down again. Now the bits that I'm planing off that sort of go left to right of shot are the original bits. So I think that bit of wood that goes sort of horizontal or whatever is a little bit sort of proud. So what I've done is I've nipped off some where the frame was, where the window frame was above, in order to get the window frame to fit, and now I've got to nip off a little bit on that as well to try and get that, because I think it was pushing the panel out a little bit. So anyway, but I didn't manage to recover that much. I was about ½ an inch out on that panel, that compass panel, and I really was hoping to get that ½ an inch back, but it would have meant taking an awful lot of wood off of that upright pillar. So I had to make a slight compromise, which I will well sort of show you later on. But anyway, so I needed to plane this off, and yeah, it did help a little bit, but it didn't quite get me there. Right, so here is the bus before the panel gets put on. As you may notice, having planed down that woodwork, I've now repainted it with a bit of black so it matches back in. I do like to protect the wood as best as possible. I'm now pushing the wires through for the side light because I pre-wired the side light already into the panel. That just reminds me, that's a little job I've got to do next Sunday. Bearing in mind this is a weekend late, this one, so it'll be a one after that. But anyway, those wires go through into the speedo box, and you also probably might notice that white putty that runs around the edge. That's mastic. Now that's actually not bad mastic. Peter Veer put me onto that. It's quite good, although it's not as pliable as some of the mastics I had before. And I've noticed when I was putting the beading back on last week, where I've got flat beading, it tends to So let's push the beading back out again. So I know what I'm going to do about that. I was fussing over that, so I may actually go and take that beading back off and then try and put a really thin layer of mastic. Now, the purpose of the mastic is to prevent water ingress into the frame. It's very important on buses in service because you go out in a rainstorm and the water makes its way into the bus, or could start the woodwork rotting again, and we don't want that. Although in preservation, we really don't go out in the rain, do we? Any rain is forecast. We like to keep our buses in the shed. So the likelihood of this bus actually seeing any rain, other than it being washed, is minimal. Anyway, so as you can see, what I'm trying to do is line it up now. Now, I did the best I possibly could to get that to fit. So what I'm going to do here is I'm putting a couple of small wood screws in, just to hold it in place, because otherwise it will fall off. So a couple of wood screws in there, and the good thing is they all sort of lined up with where the original wood screws were. And thanks to Brian Watkinson, he pointed out that the panel, there you go, don't move, don't go away, that headlight surround, you just see the bottom there, that rather large circular panel, that's where the headlight fits. And those holes, I'm told by Brian and various others, they must line up. So the first thing I've got to do is I just get it to hold in place, and then to check to make sure that those holes in the side light panel do actually line up. And so yeah, a little bit more fiddling about. Now you can see that mastic just hanging there. I wasn't too actually, no, I'll say I wasn't too impressed. The problem with it is not a bad mastic. It feels like a water-based mastic. And what it tends to do is it tends to sort of not smear about as much as some of the other mastics I've used. So they get a little bit sort of push the panel back out a bit, which I really don't want. Anyway, so let's move on, shall we? Right, the panel is now in place, and the first bit of beading, in fact, actually looking at this, I think the second bit of beading, yeah, that's the second bit of beading, is going on. Now, this one I pre-made and folded it around the edge because it goes round the door pillar, so that was pre-folded. I did that on the bench, and now what I've got to try to do in these shots is to get it to fold its way back round that corner. Now, thank you very much to Leo Solosi, he's a good friend of mine and former colleague, who pointed out the differences between a Wayman and a Park Royal bodied RT, because they both had a hand in making quite a large number of each RT type. The RT Wayman, apparently, they stopped this bit of beading short. They just sort of stopped near the window pan and just gave up with it, basically, which is not a bad idea, actually. But the Park Royal ones, they sort of carried on round and lipped onto the rubber of the window pan, which is what I'm trying to do here. This actually is a Wayman body. So I'll see how many bus enthusiasts point out that I've actually done a Park Royal modification. Now, bearing in mind, when buses got buckled in accidents, it's poetic license, and you do what you did to put the bus back in place, get it back on the road as quick as possible. So I don't really think Aldenham or anybody or any of the coach makers really bothered about whether the beading stopped in the right place or not. And it's quite evident by this, because there's so many alterations, and it is a bit of a trial to get this to do. So anyway, what I'm doing here, as you can see, is I'm just making sure that this rolls round the corner properly. Right, so having done that, I now test fitted the lower cab window, and it's got this rubber in place, so I'm going to use the edge of the rubber to make a mark on the beading, so that I can now have to remove it. So it's the thing, things go on and off with these. So then remove the beading and then cut it to shape. So a little bit more hammering later on, but yeah, that bit sizably is now finished. So let's move on to Sunday morning, shall we?
Right, hi friends, it's Sunday morning and it is chucking down with rain out there, but at least there's no thunderstorm predicted. There was a thunderstorm predicted for today. So anyway, yeah, yesterday I managed to get this panel on as a loose fit. I'm now putting the beading back. This is one I made because I had to chamfer it round the corner there. I checked the wing. Thank you, Brian and Roy, for pointing out that. This is all pretty tight now. So I think I might have overcome that problem. However, in order to follow Brian's suggestion, which make sure the headlight panel was in exactly the right place, which I've done, I've had to make a couple of minor compromises. But anyway, hopefully you won't notice those compromises, because I'm not going to tell you what they are. Anyway, yeah, getting on with it. And I'm really pleased, having left last night, to see it at least in this condition, because it's actually starting to look like a cab of a bus now. Right, let's push on.
Right, yeah, those compromises were, there were two little screws there that were proud, basically. I'll say proud, but they would have been visible. They wouldn't have sat underneath the piece of beading, because one of the things that the top beading does is that bit of beading hides all the other little screws that you saw me putting in earlier on to hold the panel in place. So there were two very small, sort of, I don't know, 5-head countersunk screws, which are where that white patch is. So what I had to do was I pushed them in as far as I could and then filled across the top and then sanded it back down again. So when the bus is painted, you won't see them. So yeah, that was my little bodge to get that panel to work again.
They would have to put a set screw through this bulkhead to a point where you can barely get your fingers. These two, nice and simple. These two, I think, are actually a couple of bolts, so they'll be a piece of cake. But this one at the top here, what a nightmare. I can hardly get my fingers in there. What I'm trying to do at the moment is get the washer on, and I'm not having much luck. I haven't got to put in the bolt on yet. Oh, hang on. I think the washer's on. Maybe. Yep, I think that's in. That's good. All right, so yeah, I haven't got to put this thing on yet. So that's going to be even more fun. I need to find the spring washer. There it is. Every time I put one on, it sort of drops down and lands on the floor. So this is the wiring for the lamp. You've got a negative in there, and I've got a full beam and a dip beam. So that's that done. And that's all wired through quite nicely now, all the way through to the cab. This is still got this thing to do, this side light just up above me. But yeah, it's getting there. I've been quite pleased with the progress so far. It's looking starting to look like a bus again. Well, at least this side does. The other side looks terrible, but yeah, this side. No, I can't find this thing. Oh, never mind. Oh well. Let's see how we get on with the next project.
Right, this is a view of the cab from above. The brown paper that's on the right hand side of shot is only there because when I clamber in and out the cab, it's putting scratches on that brown paint. But you can see most of it in the cab is done now. The pedals need to have the masking tape taken off and then sprayed. So there's 3 there. So those of you who are not familiar with an RT, let me just explain. They are sort of semi-automatic. I think someone will go, no, they're not, Dean, they're not. But you know what I mean. They're not clutch. They haven't got a clutch. The one on the extreme left is called an operating pedal. And what you do is you pre-select your gear. So if you're in, you pull off in second gear, let's say, so you pulled up at a bus stop, people are getting on and off, you move the gear selector to the second gear position, and then you press the operating pedal. And what then happens is second gear will now select in the gearbox. Then what you do is you move your gear selector to the third gear position, and ding ding, off you go. And as you move off, when the road speed builds up and you're ready to change into third gear, you then press down on the operating pedal and it picks up third gear. So you then, once you got to the third gear, you move your gear selector back to the fourth gear position, and then as you get ready for that, you repeat the process. You press the operating pedal, fourth gear is selected, and then you move your gear selector back to the third gear position and repeat that process when you're slowing down with the bus. That is basically the concept of the operating pedal. And it is easy as I've done on the odd occasion, to forget where you are. And on one occasion, I drove onto a motorway in Hackney. I think it was the A102M. And I drove up onto this motorway, and the revs of the engine were really quite loud in the cab. And I pressed the operating pedal to take what I thought was top gear. What I'd actually done was I'd moved the gear selector back to the third gear position, and I was already in fourth gear doing about 35, 38 mile an hour. And of course the bus did exactly what I'd asked it to do. It selected third, and the thing almost stood on end. But yeah, you learn your lesson with the pre-select. Some people accidentally use them like clutches, and you shouldn't do that. In other words, basically you push down the operating pedal, then you move the gear selector, and then you release the operating pedal, and that's not how you should do it. Apparently that does damage the box, but it does take a lot of getting used to. Route Masters, of course, piece of cake. You only have two pedals in them, and you push your little selector to the automatic or fourth gear position, and then the bus just merrily drives along on its own. Or if you want to if you really want to work the bus, you can work a Route Master manually like you can do an RT. But you also notice, if you look at this picture, the steering wheel isn't actually straight. The steering column, rather, is slightly at an angle. It starts sort of to the left of the cab and works its way to the right-hand side of the cab. And as a result of which, the actual wheel itself is not level. So the right-hand side is lower than the left-hand side. It's one of the sort of unique features of an RT. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just how they are. The other thing is that where that steering column sinks down into the base of where all the pedals are, that whole assembly, the column, the pedals, and that plate, are all attached to the chassis. So when the bus gets lifted off at Aldenham, all of that remains in situ and all the rest disappears. So where you are looking at the bottom of shot here, that little flap that you lift up, that shows you the air gauge for the brakes and the gearbox and everything. So that's hidden just under that panel. It's also a good way of sweeping out all the detritus in the cab as well. I'm sure that's what they got used for, really. But anyway, yeah. So that part towards the us as we're looking at it, plus all the stuff that's on the right hand side and the speedo and the cab heater and all that, when they lift the body and the chassis apart, all of that goes with the body. As I say, just leaving the steering wheel and the pedals all sitting down the bottom there. I don't know if they actually had to take the steering wheel off to get the bus separated. It's possible they might have had to. Someone might know a little bit more than I do on that one. But anyway, that's the cab. Now, the main purpose for showing you this is all that rubber is now in place. I had to make some little bits for the floor. There's a centre section there which I made. I don't know if I showed you me doing that. It's a bit boring, really. Just a flat piece of aluminium, and the neoprene rubber which closed the gap. When I bought this, there was always a gap there. And I was talking to Roy Gordon. He said apparently one of them failed its MOT for having a gap in the floor over in, I think it was Germany. Roy will say otherwise in the comments. Because the guy, the MOT tester, said there's going to be a gap in the floor. You have to fill that in and put a metal plate there. And as Roy pointed out, you can't put a metal plate there because it all moves around. Hence the reason why it's this neoprene rubber. So I bought that neoprene rubber and I fitted it in. I made a new bracket to hold it down and everything. And I also had to make another two brackets either side of it to hold the rubber that runs round the front of the bus in place. Now, while we're in the cab, the air intake for the compressor, this beautiful piece of kit, is just on the left hand side of shot there. I still need to put the cab seat back in, obviously, because you won't be able to see any of this if the cab seat was in its way. And I still need to put the lid back on the trafficator after I did my repairs on that. So the black section's back on. I just need to put the red cap on. And the red cap, the sort of twisty turny thing, I had painted it red. And I've rubbed it down again, and because I had a few brush marks in it, and I'm going to try and lose those brush marks, hence the reason why it's not there. So anyway, that's the cab. As I say, that's starting to look good as well, so I'm pleased with that. I've got a few little snagging items to do in the cab there, Yeah, she's looking like a boss again, isn't she? Right, so that's almost your lot. Yeah, what more can I say, really? Top windows in, and thanks for Peter Veer for helping me with that one. It was a little job Peter did. I've got to polish that window. I bought some glass polish because I've actually cleaned it with some Windoline type stuff, you know what I mean. And it's yeah, it looks horrible. The bottom one is new glass. You might remember it got broke in the moving of stuff around in the shed, so I had to replace that. And thank you very much to PSV Glass, because they really struggled because the thickness of glass is not the type of stuff we get now. And they actually said, "Can we provide something thicker?" And I said, "No, you can't, because it won't fit in the frame." So yeah, they really struggled to get that. So I don't want to lose that top glass. So I'm going to try to polish all those scratches out. It's really quite ancient, so I think that's probably better than actually changing it. I really don't want to take the whole thing apart again, frankly. So there you are. That's it. So the main panel's back on. The two bits of beading are back in, and the two upper and lower windows are in. I've still got so much stuff to do on this though. It's all fiddly, tiny little bits now. The headlight needs to go back in. As you can see, the little wire is looking really sad there. The side light needs to go back in, and the wing, that metal wing, which is immovable basically, that aluminium panel and the wood and everything I can move about, but the actual wing itself is pretty solid, so that needs to go back on. And for the future, not for now, there's a half round beading that goes around there. It's quite a narrow sort of little bit of beading that sort of finishes it all off, and that sits between the wing and the panel. I'm going to do that because that's the same stuff that goes around all the wheel arches. So I'm going to leave that to the very last thing. I'm going to buy in some bulk in, and then I'm going to run it all round at the same time. So I still need to get the inner wing back in, which you can't see in this shot. And I've got to put the regulator box and a few other bits and pieces back in the cab. But more about that on another day. So anyway, thank you very much for putting with us. And thank you very much for my Movani video editor holding out on about the 100th attempt of getting this thing to go. So hopefully next week's one won't be so heavy. Anyway, so thanks very much everyone, and I look forward to doing the next one, as I always do, and here YouTube will helpfully recommend you some more videos with no control by me whatsoever. See you next time. Bye.